This video is going to explain the reason why you create your reality. Why waiting for a sign, waiting for stars to align, waiting for permission, waiting for it to be the right time, waiting for ideal conditions is never going to get you what you want. You don't have to wait for permission, ideal conditions, or waiting for the right time, because what you experience in your environment begins with how you think, how you decide, how you show up, and you have to do that every single day. Let's take it back to an animal. Often animals, insects, creatures like ants are compared to humans, but that is why you have the life you have, because we think that we're the same as animals. So if you're perceiving what animals do as what you should be able to do, then that's why you're stuck in a cycle that doesn't actually exist, because you're comparing yourself to something that's incomparable. Animals and insects and creatures are not the same as humans. Even in the Bible, Luke 12:24, consider the ravens. They do not sow, they do not reap, they have no storeroom, they have no barn, yet God feeds them. And how much more valuable are you than birds? And when I would read this in the Bible, because I study science, the Bible, history, etc., to get the full picture of this life experience in this game, and I would always be so confused when I read this. Consider the ravens. I'm like, okay, I know what a raven is. It's a bird. They do not sow, which means like they don't plant stuff in fields, or they don't plant any seeds, nor do they reap. So they don't sow any plants. They don't go and pick those plants and use them. They have no storeroom. They have nowhere to hide or keep anything. It's just them as a bird, themselves. And they don't have a barn. They ain't got nowhere where they can return to and sleep. So they don't have the ability to plant anything for themselves, grow anything for themselves, keep anything for themselves, store anything for themselves, or house anything for themselves, including themselves. Yet God feeds them. And then it proceeds to say, how much more valuable are you than birds? And I used to think, well, I thought God made all of us equal. And then I had to think, there's got to be a reason why this is said in the Bible. Because if God provides for nature, the birds, the animals, the creatures, the flowers, and it's saying how much more will he provide for me, that means that I get more than all the bare necessities. Because the ravens don't sow, they don't reap, they don't have storeroom, they don't have a barn. And then I get all that plus more. But then another question came up. Well, why do we get more than the ravens? Why do we get more than the birds? Why do we get more than creatures and animals in nature? And it's because we were given unique faculties. Bob Proctor talked about this in one of his seminars. Because unlike insects and animals, we don't just adapt to our environment like them. We have the power to actually create it. An ant is an ant. An ant is an ant. An ant will always be an ant, and it's going to live to be an ant, and it's going to die as an ant. An ant is going to build a life from instinct, because it's just an ant. A horse will always be a horse, will always just be a horse. A horse is not going to grow up and go to Harvard. A penguin is not going to grow up and start a business. A dog is not going to grow up and learn to drive NASCARs. These creatures, these animals, these insects don't have the ability to create their own environment. They don't have the power to do that. But we do. So this is literally the reason why you don't have to wait for permission or the right time or conditions to be right, because we don't act from instinct. Our life is built from how we think, how we decide, how we show up every single day. So, what actual faculties were we given? We were given imagination. We can see beyond what currently exists. We were given intellect, the ability to choose. And not only choose, but choose with intention. The ability to make decisions. We were given will, the ability to take aligned action in whatever we intentionally choose to do. We were given the power of emotion, to connect, to feel. We were also given self-awareness, to observe, to evolve. Insects were made to react to their environment. They are always going to be just what they are. But humans were literally entrusted with the ability to create beyond what's here, choose beyond what we already have, to co-author and co-create reality, because we are more capable, we're more valuable, we're more intentional, we're more intellectual. And I think that a lot of us actually do want to believe this way. Like if somebody compared your intelligence to a dog, you would be offended. So on a conscious level, on a surface level, most of us actually agree with what I'm saying. We agree that we're different than creatures and animals because we know that we have the option to choose. We have the option to create. We're way more valuable and capable of what we can actually create. So if you actually do think that we can create and we have the power to create, well, here is where you start to accept the fact that you don't have to wait for permission. You don't have to wait for the right time. Because if what you do is what changes the environment, then you must think different. You must decide to do different things. You must decide to show up and be different every single day. And when we learn to use these unique faculties to our benefit, and we don't just accept it on a surface level, a conscious level, we actually say, I am accepting that all this is real, and I'm going to act without my instinct. I'm not going to play this game as if I'm a instinctual creature. I can create whatever future I want. It doesn't matter. Whatever I think and believe and put out and show up as is going to be reflected because I have the power of vision, of intellect, of choice. If I want to live a different life, I will, because I have will and I can choose to do that. And what I want you to do is ask yourself just one way that you've been instinctually living as if you're some sort of creature, like you're an ant that's just supposed to go back and forth between picking up breadcrumbs and putting them in a pile. Like that is not what your life is supposed to be. You can choose to do whatever you want to do. And you don't actually have to neglect the fact that you have intellect and you have choice and you have will and you have creativity and you have a ability that creatures and insects and animals do not have. You are so beyond powerful. You are so powerful. You hold the knowledge of generations of people. It all lives within your body. All of it. You're so incredibly capable of doing whatever you want in your lifetime.